and to jump off the garage roof because he thought he could fly. He wanted to be an astronaut when he grew up. He had a voice like a golden thread stretched out in the sun, so pure and pretty that it inevitably doomed him to playing the angel whenever Christmas plays were performed. Minna, his sister, was much plainer. She was the only one of Edith and Wilbur's children who hadn't been given a middle name. Minna was a sweet, nondescript child, tall and lanky for her age. She had long, mousy brown hair, blunt bangs, and a please-like-me smile that should have gone right to the heart of any adult who happened to cross her path, but somehow didn't. It was Gabriel and Minna who got their sister up in the morning, dressed her, fed her, bathed her, loved her. Without them, she probably would have starved to death long before she had reached her first birthday. Because of them, she made it. But just barely. When Edith Tuttle was enthroned against the pillows on her bed in the maternity ward, she had been given a form with an empty slot provided where she was to fill out her newborn's name. Instead, she wrote the words Baby Tuttle and told the nurse that she would think of a real nice name later, but she never did. Baby Tuttle. Sometimes Edith called her the baby, almost in the same tone that a person would refer to the refrigerator or the mailbox. Sometimes she would refer to her youngest as it, as in, "Did anybody remember to feed it?" Or, "I'm sure it was in the bedroom before I came downstairs." Usually she didn't refer to it at all. Baby Tuttle was quiet, pensive, and judgmental. She had a habit of linking eyes with a chosen few adults. And physically she was precocious. She was crawling at 2 months, walking at 6, and climbing before she was 8 months old. Wherever she was, she wanted to be someplace else. She was active without being hyperactive, a small, determined, ambulant universe unto herself, opting to endure the ministrations of her brother and sister as if she knew that she had to be fed, clothed, bathed, and groomed in order to be launched. A moment of docility was the price she was willing to pay for the reward of movement, freedom, self-determination, and escape. And those who had seen her in action speculated that it was probably this particular characteristic, more than any instinct for survival or unconscious response to danger, that saved her life. Yes, she did walk, tumble, toddle, or fall out of the ugly house's front door and down the steps to the gravel and dirt driveway. Yes, she did flee the fire that killed Minna and Gabriel. But she would have escaped anyway, with or without the fire, because leaving the ugly house was the one ineradicable constant of her existence. That is all that she had ever wanted to do. Chapter 2. Billy Nightingale came from a family of extremists. Billy's father, Mortimer, said that Billy's mother, Evelyn, never made statements. She only made sweeping statements. In turn, Billy's mother complained that Billy's father would work hard to locate the one brick wall in the middle of an open field so that he could get a running start to butt his head right up against it. Nobody disagreed that Billy's sister Annie made Sarah Bernhardt look like a piker. And all of the Nightingales, including the ranch hands, believed that Billy himself was going to be the star of his own epic disaster movie. Or at least he was until he reached the age of 15, at which point he changed. Sort of. Both Billy and Annie were born in the town of Rawlins, Wyoming. Annie was 11 years old when her English teacher gave her an assignment to write a composition about her family. She was told that she could describe their genealogy, their involvement in sports, their health, their histories, anything, as long as it was true. This is what Annie Nightingale wrote. How the Nightingale got his name. Annie Nightingale, grade 6. My mother came from jolly old England. She was born in Manchester. She had 2 parents and 3 sisters, except that one died when she was 2 days old, and 3 brothers. My mother's name is Evelyn. When she was 17 years old, she got into a spectacular fight with her parents because she wanted to be an actress. They said, "You'd better not do it, because if you do, off with your head." So Evelyn journeyed to America and got a job with a bunch of other adventurous people who put on plays and sometimes sang songs and danced and did magic tricks. Evelyn was very pretty, and she had fabulous long red hair and beautiful blue eyes. In her job, she always got the part of the princess or the girl who got pregnant, even though her boyfriend wouldn't marry her. She went to a lot of different cities with her job, and one time she played Desdemona and got strangled 60 times in 52 days. When she was 20 years old, she was in Cheyenne, Wyoming. It was 5 degrees below zero, and it was snowing so hard that Evelyn's group couldn't get out. They were stuck in the hotel. It was late at night, and some guys were playing music, and some other guys who were ranchers from Elk Mountain were in town to make trouble and spend their paychecks, and one of the troublemakers was a gigantic man over 9 feet tall. He had wide shoulders like an ox, and big hands like a monster. But he had a nice face, and his voice was low and soft and gentle, and Evelyn said it reminded her of a train whistle. So this guy saw Evelyn sitting alone at a table with another girl, and the other girl said, "I hate this place. I hate snow. I hate winter." Evelyn said, "It is bleak, isn't it?" And the other girl said, "Yes, it's disastrous. There's nothing out there but snow, snow, and more snow." Evelyn looked out the window and didn't see anything alive, not a dog or a cat or a mouse or a flower or a bird. And she sighed and said, "My kingdom for a nightingale," because she used to like seeing those birds in jolly old England. And that's when this 9-foot-tall guy comes over to her table and leans down, which he had to do because he was so tall, and he says, "Well, what do you know, little miss? My name just happens to be Mortimer Nightingale." Well, pretty soon Mortimer asks Evelyn to dance, and pretty soon he tells her about the ranch where he raises cattle and sheep about 20 miles into the Medicine Bow Mountain Range. And pretty soon he asks her to marry him, and pretty soon she says yes because she doesn't want to be an actress anymore. And then they got married, and Mortimer said, "Guess what?" And Evelyn said, "What?" And Mortimer said, "I lied to you. When I heard you say my kingdom for a nightingale, I fell in love with you, so I changed my name. I did it right then at the dance hall, just like that, so that you'd dance with me. But I changed it legally later on, so you really are Mrs. Mortimer Nightingale." Then my father looked at Evelyn and said, "Are you mad at me?" And Evelyn said, "No." And they lived happily ever after, which is good for me because if Evelyn had said, "My kingdom for a milkshake," I could have been named Annie Milkshake. And if she hadn't said anything, I would have been Annie Kusavitsky, daughter of Mortimer and Evelyn Kusavitsky, which would have been a fate worse than death. At the top of her paper, Annie's teacher had scrawled, "You really must learn to curb your imagination. Next time, tell the truth." In all fairness to Annie, with the exception of her father's height and the color of her mother's hair, Annie had more or less stuck to the facts, in particular those that explained how the Nightingales got their name. About Billy, though, the thing that made him seem like a helium balloon drifting toward a sharp object was his tendency to grab onto every new fact, idea, or piece of information that came his way, and on a minute-by-minute basis try to literally reinvent the wheel, the toaster, his father's weed whacker, his mother's electric hair curlers, his sister's dolls. When Billy was 6 years old, he joyfully realized that he could insert his plastic rocket ships into the slots of the toaster, depress the lever for a countdown, and blast off. Ping! Up those little buggers sprung almost as high as the tops of the kitchen cabinet doors. Billy's second countdown was equally successful, but by his third, the rockets had started to smolder a bit. On the fourth, the plastic melted and stuck to the red-hot coils on either side of the toaster's bread slot. There was a terrible smell, a small fire, and... Billy's father's weed whacker was another experiment. Billy had been studying South America in his 7th grade history class when he learned that Argentinian cowboys used an intriguing weapon made of a long cord and heavy balls at the end called a bola. It was used for throwing at and entangling the legs of cattle. Fascinating, Billy thought, looking at his father's weed whacker. It had a long cord, and if he drilled a hole through a croquet ball, he could attach it to the cord, and instead of manually swinging a bola over his head, he could use the cord of the weed whacker to... One window was broken and one wall demolished before Billy's interest in South American ranching practices was put to rest. Billy joyfully disemboweled radios and television sets. He encased the metal prongs of his mother's electric hair rollers in clay and plugged them in, convinced that his makeshift kiln would produce a candelabra capable of holding 24 variously sized candles. Instead, His experiment resulted in a lump of plastic-fused clay that looked like the larva of